Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, grasshoppers. We have a further matching wits with Vishwanathan Anand, the godfather of chess in India. Basically, his work is reaping the maximum rewards with the new 18th world champion at 18 years of age, Domaraju Gukesh. And of course, there are quite a number of Indian players in his wake, so I'm certain that we are going to have an incredible return of chess to India, the birthplace of chess from many years ago. Chess basically originated almost 2 millennia ago in the Persian Empire area, which encompassed parts of India, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Afghanistan, that entire area for the most part. And the return of chess to that area after a little more than a decade off since Anand lost the title, less than a decade off since Anand lost the title to Magnus Carlsen in 2013, is a very welcome sight for the continent of India. In this particular game, we are going to be exploring the idea that we can play like Anand if we dig deep. So, for example, Anand was a tremendous 1e4 player, and his style resembled that of Bobby Fischer and Capablanca, with a touch of Karpov thrown in the technical department. Now, Lubomir Ftacnik is a highly theoretical player. He knew all the theory. In fact, he wrote a Grandmaster repertoire for black on the Najdorf Sicilian. I believe it was the 6th edition of the Grandmaster repertoire for black, which was, believe it or not, a really well-respected series of how to play the openings at the highest possible level, produced by Quality Chess. Quality Chess made its name with those books early on. The games did not feature complete games, unfortunately, so I had a harder time recommending them. But of course, Ftacnik is true to his word, and he does play the opening moves for the Najdorf Sicilian. So we're going to start here, for the most part, with our candidate move process, as there are several moves to choose from. We can still try to outwit our opponent as early as move 3. We could also do this against move number 2, knight c6. Now, the purpose of the candidate move process is to scoop up all of the good moves in the position. Scooping up all of the good moves in the position, and then only then calculating, assessing, weighing them against our present plans and purposes. A move is only as good as the idea behind it, and you really do have to weigh up precisely and exactly what that move accomplishes for you and for your plan. So in this particular instance, Anand, of course, takes the bull by the horns and plays d4, but there are many players that might try to play the move bishop to b5 check.
Said d4.
Yes, of course, d4. d4 is best by test, honestly. We could also try to outwit our opponent in some areas by playing knight to c3 with move order transpositions. We could even consider, and those are the 3 best moves in the position, we could even consider a waiting move like h3, as h3 is also possible in many of the open variations, such as against the Najdorf. In fact, today I think h3 is considered one of the best, if not the best move against the Najdorf. So let's just take this as Grandmaster Lubomir Ftacnik continues in this position, and now we have, believe it or not, so many candidate moves to choose from that we have to really consider what's going on here. Today we know that there are 3 moves preferred by the computer. I prefer the 4th move, the traditional move against the Najdorf, the one that has caused it such great pains for decades upon decades since its inception. The Najdorf has struggled with the traditional sixth move. Although I may have thrown some people off the path by referencing Fischer, as he modeled Fischer, and he modeled Karpov, so I might have thrown people off of that.
Said. BG5 F4 H3 BC4.
Nicely done, Pegasus. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron Hay, massive supporter of the stream. I have to remember to turn off the sub-only chat when we're done, because not everyone has Ron's benefits in contributing and being a part of the stream. But here, Karpov almost always preferred bishop e2, and one of my youngest students, she actually beat her first master at the age of 10 using this move because she was studying Karpov's games. Bishop c4, as Ron has mentioned, is the move choice of Bobby Fischer. And Bobby Fischer also chose the number one move chosen by Stockfish, h3, for 3 games around 1967 or 1966-67, when he found that everyone was copying his Najdorf against him. And when he found out that people were copying his Najdorf against him, he said, oh yeah? What if I play the move h3 on the 6th move? Today, it actually turns out that h3 is a very formidable weapon, along with the 3rd best move in the position, f3, which avoids any complications ensuing after knight to g4, since Anand actually chooses the move bishop to e3. Now, bishop to e3 is, of course, a very worthy choice. I'm giving it an exclam because Anand chose it. And it was not in Ron Hay's candidate moves, but bishop to g5, to me, is the tried and true mark of the Grandmaster fighting the Najdorf. Geller, in Bobby Fischer's 60 memorable games, actually played this move, and Fischer lost a very hair-raising game with the move against the move bishop g5, and it's one of 3 losses that are included in Fischer's book, 60 memorable games. So, in any event, bishop to e3 was played, and honestly, the best move by black, e5, is not chosen here. Ftacnik sort of whips out and plays into the Scheveningen system, a small-centered Sicilian. And the small-centered Sicilian, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, as black seeks to control all the squares on his 4th rank, and like a coiled spring, he is going to burst out later with the tension in the center. So, Anand, of course, continues with the standard f3. We can no longer allow any funny business with knight to g4. And after b5, the standard move. Personally, in this position, I prefer our vegetarian killer whale, a.k.a. the engines, Stockfish. I call him Bruce. Bruce's recommendation of queen to d2 and not g4. There are quite a number of moves that could be played in this position, in fact. But of the moves that are played, instead of bishop d3, g4, or queen to d2, of those 3 moves, Anand chooses the youthful attempt to crush the opponent with g4. Now, black should, honestly, answer with the move h6 against this as a matter of principle. Basically, white might play h4 later on, but queen to d2, bishop to b7, and we're going to go with some candidate moves for white again. In this particular position, we have 3 very natural moves in the position. We just have to choose how we're going to continue. Candidate moves for white. Some very sharp players have been found on both sides of this opening, including myself. I also have a game against the 2400 on Lichess on the black side of this. Albeit against queen to d2, the early queen to d2, not against the early g4. I played knight on b to d7 and knight to c5 as black. So again, the purpose. Good morning, Jim Otabek. How are you? Namaste. Commentary is welcome on the YouTube channel, or subscribers here, unfortunately. But thank you, GM Otebek. Now, in this particular instance, we have a very double-edged position on our hands. So the three candidate moves that almost anyone should have come up with are the moves castles queenside, first and foremost. That should be the natural opening principled reply. We need to get our king safe, all of our pieces active, and we need to maintain a handle on the center throughout the game. This applies throughout the game. Primarily, we don't necessarily have to.
Thanks for following.
We don't necessarily have to always follow the principles, but Grandmaster Joel Benjamin once told me that it's often useful to be one move away from castling when the position is semi-open or semi-closed. You can be one move away from castling, and that should be good enough to be able to get your play started, for the most part. In this particular instance, Anand chooses the best move, h4. Now, granted, the third best move is a move like rook to g1. We could have also considered, after bishop to b7, we could have also considered some cautionary moves such as a3, or some developing moves such as bishop to d3 to fortify the e4 point. But in general, we're looking for the three candidate moves in the position that will be closest to our plan, and only after we have all the good moves do we analyze forward, comparing them, assessing them, and doing a little bit of stepping stone analysis, as Grandmaster Jonathan Tisdall calls it. Stepping stone analysis forward to see what we like and where the assessments lie in our position. So this particular instance, we'll hit the music down just a little bit. So in this particular instance, Anand does choose the most dynamic move, h4, in the position, and his opponent, Anand-Ftacnik, does not shy away from the task of hitting his knight on c3. The knight doesn't really have that ambitious of a goal, having not been, since white's king is not castled. We can't really throw this knight into the center like we would if we were castled. So therefore the knight retreats to e2. Black would like to complete his development, and perhaps he should, with knight on b to d7, but instead counterattacks in the center. And now the game gets even sharper. Traditionally, when I have played the Sicilian across the decades, I know that black prefers to play the move when white does not have the move e5. So therefore, the very principled reply here, if black is not going to play the move knight on b to d7 to try to restrict e5, after the move d5, Anand follows up very logically with the move e5, sentencing this knight back. Now, how in the world can one expect to play the knight, and I don't recommend this as an opening for beginners by any means. Most Sicilians are off limits for novice to low intermediate players, because you just have to know too much opening theory rather than learning how to play chess properly. So it's just not worth it. We do have to support the unprotected e5 pawn with f4, and black can indeed counterattack in one of two ways. We can bring our knight to the center or our bishop. He chooses to move the same piece yet again. Remember, this knight's journey has involved moving the same piece over and over again. He only has two pieces developed, while white is literally two moves from completing the connection of his rooks. And obviously white is better in this position because of that. However, often tactics get in the way. So bishop to g2, Anand follows his first and foremost impressions of the position. Black needs to catch up in development with knight on b to d7. White castles. Black needs to get his king out of the center, or is it too late? Candidate moves for white in this position. I just have to mention that if you are a subscriber on YouTube, chat is free there, or a subscriber on Twitch in order to chat. Again, we're scooping up all the good moves. Now, granted, if you do not really put the emphasis on the move that Anand played, just because you don't get the exact move that he played, does not mean that the candidate move process was a failure. It primarily means that if, I repeat, if you have Anand's move among your candidate moves, it is a very good result. If you at least considered the move that was played by the Grandmaster or the World Champion in the game, then it was a success. So obviously we have a few different ideas here. Many Grandmasters today actually choose to tuck their king away with king to b1. Many Grandmasters might try to reroute their queen across to the king side.
KB1G5.
Absolutely. Ron? And we still have the idea of moving our rooks to better files to push on the file. But as Ron points out, Anand actually presses forward with g5. The drawback with this particular move is that our opponent is going to blockade this situation. So therefore we need to come up with one more follow-up move to make this whole thing worthwhile. And so therefore we need one more candidate move. This is a YouTube series on the godfather of India chess, Anand. And basically you may match wits with him, you may try to find the move, you may learn from his games, and in fact by osmosis you will begin to play like a world champion if you go over enough of their games.
Pegasus sway.
Said. G6.
Ron put all of his eggs in one basket with g6, but if we had 3 moves to choose from in this position, I'm positive that he would have found Anand's best move in the position, which happened to be f5. Throwing caution to the wind, because we have to be able to exchange material for time and space. Throwing caution to the wind with f5 is certainly the best move. g6 was the second best move. We want to try to undermine these squares. Perhaps we can try to get something going after bishop h3 in this particular instance, or knight to g3, depending on what happens. But on the whole, relocating a rook to the f file was also an option, or tucking our king away was also an option. That should always be among your candidate moves. And chances are you will be right, because Anand did play moves on the better side of caution when he's older, as he becomes world champion. Remember, the year is 1993. He's not yet become world champion. This is an interzonal tournament held in Biel, Switzerland by FIDE to determine the challenger. I repeat, to determine the challenger to Karpov. Because at this point in 1993, Kasparov has already taken the FIDE title and packed it away in a suitcase. And no repercussions, of course, happened to him, not unlike how Magnus Carlsen decided to split the title of the World Blitz Championship. In this particular position, obviously, Black has to take White's challenge head on with knight takes e5. And we have to continue with candidate moves for White. Please consider several moves here in order to follow up on Anand's improvement of his position, capitalizing on the king being in the center. An interzonal tournament was a tournament that tried to determine the challenger to the World Championship from a variety of zonal tournaments. All of the national championships of major countries counted as a zonal tournament. The U.S. Championship, top 2 or top 3, often qualified for the interzonal tournament. In many areas and regions where they did not have a plethora of grandmasters, such as the United States, they would combine various countries, such as the South American zonal. Or the South African zonal tournament, where all the players from that local area would convene in a zonal tournament. And they would have to qualify through the zonal tournament to get to the interzonal tournament. And the interzonal tournament would then determine the participants in candidate matches. Candidate matches usually were a best of a smaller amount of games than the actual World Championship, which used to be best of 24 games. So this is an interzonal tournament. We do know that Anand succeeds in this tournament to challenge Karpov because he's also in the candidate cycle of the PCA Kasparov Intel-sponsored World Championship cycle, which culminated in Anand playing Kasparov at the top of the World Trade Center in 1995, which we are leading up to in this particular series. However, he faltered against Gatakemsky, and Gatakemsky actually played in this cycle. Gatakemsky was the one who challenged Karpov for the World Championship title out of this series in 1994. So here we are. White needs to play a move that follows up, and he does. He finds the best move, knight to f4. I have to give it an exclamation mark, as several other moves are possible. F takes e6 is possible. Queen e1, of course. We can try to eyeball this long diagonal and reroute our queen to the king side. Or perhaps we can just batten down the hatches on the king side, as we see Anand play in a different game later on. But none of these moves have quite the ferociousness or the purposefulness of knight to f4, which puts pressure on all the white squares in the center. Of course, we have to worry about knight to c4, which was the meaning behind b3, preserving our dark squared bishop. So after queen to e2, black could have, perhaps even should have, captured this bishop right away. But of course, the most active and best move by black is played, eyeballing the weakness on a2. So therefore, it is way overdue that we play king to b1. And now, Ftacnik throws some wood on the fire. And it is time to go through our candidate move process once again. What do we really need to do here in this position? Interestingly enough, we need nerves of steel to navigate this position. And that is what Anand has. Nerves of steel. Exactness in calculation, trust in one's own ability. Now, of course, black has landed the first blow near our king, as the white pieces are our primary concern since Anand is playing white. But if you were to have battened down the hatches with knight to b3,
and b3,
attempting simplification, absolutely, that was the second best move in the position. Perhaps even bringing more resources over with bishop to d2 may also work, but this position has only been played once in Lichess theoretical history, and Anand does follow up with the courageous, f takes e6. And black should, by the way, attempt with all of his will and might to either batten down the hatches, or as he does in the game, he attempts to escape stage left, or stage right in his particular case. But as the viewer we're looking at it, that is stage left. And now, once again, we can improve for the first time on Anand by choosing candidate moves. And Anand does not necessarily find the best move, but he finds the most practical move in this position. And of course, you may also pause the video if you're watching it on demand later to give yourself more time, but the most important thing is that you see the game through. And don't worry so much about whether or not you can find the best move. or lock yourself down and not enjoy the move to the fullest. All right, so Anand actually chose this moment, believe it or not, to capture the knight. He could have also sought further simplification
NB3x7
with knight to b3. But ironically, we have to ask ourselves, where are the weaknesses? Which are the best or worst placed pieces? And what is the opponent's big idea? So once we realize, of course, which pieces might be participating in this attack, and what is our opponent's big idea, I might have gone for a move like knight to b3 rather than king takes b2. Anand truly has to calculate very exactly to take that knight on b2. However, if you spot the weakness, you'll see that the move knight f5 actually pinpoints the bishop on e7, opens up the d file, and actually prepares to a great extent to try to maximize the pressure on the center with the help of this rook, etc. So knight to f5 was by far the most exacting move. But Anand, of course, is a master strength calculator. When I spoke with him in Singapore, I mentioned, as I had a conversation with another streamer in the World Rapid and Blitz, I basically commented that I had a suggestion with Anand in Singapore, and he starts calculating rings around me. Good morning, Kingslayer Sloan. We're doing a YouTube instructional on the godfather of India chess, Vishwanathan Anand, whom I've known since 1993 or so, roughly, since he first came to New York, that I had an opportunity to meet him. The Anand series is available on YouTube, and you will practice your game and learn from Anand through osmosis. However, Anand is a master strength calculator. As I mentioned in Singapore, I made a suggestion, and he calculates rings around me, and all I can do is nod. Another grandmaster throws in a suggestion somewhere on move 5 or 8 of his calculation, and then he recalculates with that, and these two grandmasters are calculating over me, 15 moves deep, assessing the position from Gukesh and Ding, and I'm like, okay, I can't calculate that quickly. I can calculate, and I can calculate well, but I certainly can't calculate as well as the world champions or as well as the grandmasters. So the number one thing you can do to improve your chess, work on your candidate moves and go deep, go live with calculation. So Anand actually takes this, allows this check, and believe it or not, allows further attacking possibilities with b3, and I have a hard time allowing this. But honestly, yes, indeed, we have to worry about bishop to a3 check and knight to c3 check. And in this particular position, it is true that our queen is being attacked. But the good news is we're also attacking our opponent's queen. So he had to have worked all of this out very, very exactly. As his opponent does find the best move, queen a4, we now have to improve the position of our pieces. So we place our queen on d3. And now black re-establishes the threat to c2, and we're going to go with candidate moves on a very easy one for everyone this time. As there are only a couple of moves that we could at all play in this position. We're going very easy on everyone. And I have actually used moves like this one in the past very conveniently. And I'm very proud of one that helped me put myself into the leadership position of one tournament. Basically, in one particular tournament, my opponent had unbearable pressure on c2 with my king on c1. So I actually found the move knight to a1, which shut down everything he was doing, and I went on to win almost effortlessly. But knight a1 is not an easy move to plan for ahead of time, which I'm positive that Anand in this particular position simply battens down the hatches with the move knight to c1. We're not at all worried about the rook, and nor can we deal with the threat of queen takes a2 checkmate in any other way, short of giving up our queen, honestly. Or deferring it with the move queen to c4. So in this particular instance, knight to c1 prevents the mate. Black steps his king out of danger ever so slightly. And after bishop to d4, it seems as though everything's in order. Black brings another attacker to the c file. White gives an intermediate check against the king. And at this very moment, we play perhaps, or we go for candidate moves once again, as Ron Hayes' candidate moves from earlier may or may not come into effect. We have just a moment here to promote our podcast, The French Bishop Chesscast. All the connections may be found in this manner. You may also find my playlist of my best games on YouTube, or you may simply go and subscribe to the YouTube to comment on this stream, or participate in the playlist of Anand's best games. So as it turns out, in this particular position, once again, with nerves of steel, we could capture on f7 without abandon. However, Anand chooses a different tack, playing queen to e3 check. And, of course, he could also have brought another piece toward the king side with knight takes d5. Anand goes with the more forceful, and as he is a tremendously great calculator, the more forceful move, queen to e3 check. Rook to c5 is a very precarious move. The safest move for black was to just tuck his king away on the 8th rank. Perhaps it shouldn't have been on a dark square in the first place, but these bishops are extremely treacherous. So he blocks with the rook, and it's at this moment that all of our candidate moves come into play. Once again, knight takes d5 could be the best move. There is no time actually for e takes f7 as stuff is brewing around us. And in this particular instance, white chooses, Anand chooses, not to give up his rook, but rather to eliminate the threat of what is happening on the c3, a2, and queenside squares. So black, of course, threatens mate once again, queen to b1. So we have to eliminate this threat. Bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3 check, and after rook takes c3, queen takes c3, we also have to really consider the fact that black's rook is pinned. It does not have the option of recapturing. So after queen takes c3, queen takes c3, the game boils down to this very moment where, all in all, white just wins the game with the move g6, a powerful protected passed pawn. The pawn on d5 is falling. It is attacked twice. The rook on h1 is coming into the game. And if we do a quick assessment of this position, we can see that white has 2 knights in return for the rook on f8. And it won't be for long that the knight actually overwhelms that rook, and we bring a piece in order to help promote that pawn. All in all, this was an amazing game by the aspiring world champion Viswanathan Anand, as he is approaching the summit in 1993, about to play a match with either Karpov or Garry Kasparov in the PCA Intel World Cycle. By the way, another candidates tournament match situation in the PCA World Championship cycle took place at Trump Tower on 56th and 5th Avenue in Manhattan. I was at that as the assistant arbiter, thanks to Sophia Road, international arbiter, the late Carol Jarecki, and many others who made that possible. Andrew at Intel was the main Intel representative who organized it. And I have to say, it was quite the event, meeting Anand, Tivyakov, Kramnik, Michael Adams, and many others in that event. So the PCA World Championship cycle is going on at the same time as this one. The Professional Chess Association was a union of grandmasters looking out for the rights of the players, as one has been bandied about most recently because of the event that took place at the World Rapid and Blitz in more than one respect. Thanks to everyone for being here. Cheers and ciao. I hope you enjoyed this. We will talk again soon. If I can keep it to 30-ish minutes, that is ideal. Feel free to listen to this at 1.2. Just like the podcast, 1.2 speed is ideal. Thank you, everyone. Cheers and ciao. Have a great day. Thank you, GMO Tebek, for your follow.